Fantasy Rap
with Austin and Ozzy.
Oh, I just love those boys.
Hey everyone, this is Fantasy Rap, and I'm your host Ozzy.
And I'm your co-host Austin.
You can find us on fantasyrap.com. That is fantasywrap.com. Hey everybody, welcome to week 5. We are going to start off with P's Picks. Hey everyone, we have Sutton here. Hi Sutton.
Oh, I need crackers.
You need quackers? How about we have quackers next week?
He's got a week off.
Quackers needs a week off, okay?
He's got to rest. Sound good?
Is that okay? Okay.
All right. Looking at your fingers.
So we had a football game last night, didn't we? Yep. And it was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. And it was a pretty good game.
Yep.
Who would you like us to talk about? You want us to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you look up and say goodbye?
Bye.
And there you have it. Sutton decided that we were going to talk about Tampa Bay.
Yep.
I can't say I watched any of the game last night because I was watching the Brewers. Had to.
Sad.
Yeah. I probably should have just watched football because Brewers made you happy and then took it all away from you. Mm-hmm. So, interesting game.
Yeah.
Cousins went off, but we're not talking about Atlanta. Drake London and Mooney had big games, but we're not talking about Atlanta. We're going to talk about Tampa Bay. And actually, Baker Mayfield didn't have a bad game.
No.
He was 19 of 24 for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns, rushed 6 times for 42 yards.
Yeah.
I think most fantasy managers, you'd rather have 509-yard passing because that's a lot of points. Mm-hmm. But 180 and 3 touchdowns plus 42 yards rushing.
Yeah, the rushing was kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Because that was something that Baker was really good at in college. And then, got to Cleveland and didn't do it. Did it some, but Baker's, a little kind of sneaky.
Yeah.
So, obviously.
And he makes great commercials.
Yeah, that too. Obviously you'd like to see more passing yardage, but I'll take 3 touchdowns.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, and they were obviously at that game. It ended up going into overtime too. So,
right.
You look at some of the stat lines, and none of them are monstrous, like, London and Mooney, that we're not talking about. Even though I'll talk about I played against Kirk Cousins, London, and Pitts. I showed you that. So in my Yahoo League, I'm starting the week down 88 points. So
heck of a position when you normally score. What is a normal score? 110?
In our league this year, probably in that like 110 to 118 range, somewhere in there. And
so he's 30 points off from 118, and
he's
got the remainder of his team.
He's got some tougher matchups for the rest of his squad. So we'll see. But he's sitting in a very, very good position.
Yeah.
So
with 2 running backs and a wide receiver and a kicker and a defense.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying.
Yeah.
So then we move on, and we had Rashad White. He had 3 catches on 3 targets for a big -6 yards. Mm-hmm. He went -2, -2, and -2 on those. And he had 10 rushes for 72 yards. Out-touched Irving by 2. Irving had 2 catches on 2 targets for 12 yards and 9 rushes for 44. Mm-hmm. Not the kind of numbers you want out of either of them.
Yeah, well, Irving had a fumble at the end that sounds like I, at that point, was asleep. So, but it sounds like he had a fumble that sounds like it cost them the game, essentially. So, not good, but, kid's a rookie.
Right.
But eye test, he looks so much better than Rashad White. Rashad White, he broke it was like a 30-yarder, but just looked super slow. And I think if that was Bucky on that play, Bucky would have either scored or would have been pushed out it would have been a race for the pylon.
Right.
So, Rashad White, he's been fine. Obviously last year he had so much passing work. That's what, he finished in the top 10 for fantasy, at least
right.
PPR. And it was because of his passing work, or receiving work. So that's kind of what he's known for. And the head coach has said that they're going to use both of them all season. So,
right.
Which is a little frustrating because Bucky has, he's young, has the juice, looks so much better out on the field, but he's a little smaller guy. Rashad White's bigger, so, he can figure he can handle some of the, the heavier workload.
Yep.
But, and White's also, I think he missed a game or two last season. Year prior was injured, so if White gets injured, I think Irving's going to be the guy there.
Oh yeah. Your problem right here is if you're an owner of Rashad White, mm-hmm. you're going to lose touches to Bucky Irving, mm-hmm. and you can't go out and necessarily get Bucky Irving because he's right now, unless Rashad White gets injured, yep. he's not going to see more than about half of the touches.
Yeah.
So it really makes the situation there. I mean, it's not like a Bijan and Algier type of thing. Algier sees a couple of carries. That's it. Mm-hmm. At least, in this situation, you're at a point where I don't think either of them is really worth a whole lot to you right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll speak for the Bucky Irving managers because I have them in that Yahoo league. I picked them up 3 weeks after week 1, and for me, he's a stash. They've got a couple more tougher matchups, and I think their bye week coming up in a couple weeks. After that, the schedule opens up, and if he continues to, minus the fumble, look eye test better than Rashad White, I'm in the camp that he will eventually take over as the 1A. So,
But if it's a 1A, 1B.
Yes, that is true. And that too, I mean, and for me, Irving, I mean, I've got Jahmyr Gibbs and Kyron as my starting running backs. Right. Obviously, Gibbs is on bye this week, so I'm hoping that Kareem Hunt ends up playing because he's my RB2 this week. So he put in 2 limited practices this week, so hopefully. But
gotcha.
I think if Rashad White does, hopefully not. I don't hope for injuries, but if it were to happen and he missed some time, I think Bucky would take over, and when it came back, it would be a more of a 60-40, 70-30 where Bucky is the 1A. So yeah,
we'll see.
Yep.
Next up, we've got Godwin, who had 5 catches on 6 targets or 64 yards, 1 rush for 2 yards. Mm-hmm. And then we had Evans, who had 5 catches on 7 targets for 2 fewer yards, but 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, that's a Mike Evans stat line if I've ever seen it. Well, minus a lot of times when he puts up 2 touchdowns, it's with 100 yards. But
right.
That's a Mike Evans 2 touchdowns.
And he threw his 100th TD reception into the stands, just like he threw the 600th of Brady's into the stands. So apparently he's a good ball player, but he doesn't have a clue as to what the situation is outside of the game.
Yep.
I mean, and I get it. I mean, you're in a game. You're not, and that goes to show, Evans obviously doesn't care about personal mm-hmm. numbers. You go out and you play the game. It's touchdown 600.
But
I don't know.
He just happens to be, a receiver who's never had less than 1,000 yards in a season with some pretty bad quarterbacks in the past. I mean, the guy's Brady. He's one of those guys.
Oh wait,
yeah, he's kind of like he's one of those guys like a Terry McLaurin who's had 10 horrible quarterbacks, and then now finally gets Jaden Daniels, and they're starting to click.
Right.
And, McLaurin's put up 2 big weeks, but Evans just, he just gets it done, and you don't hear a whole lot out of him, whether it's money or whatever. So, but yeah, so I mean, Tampa, ended up losing that game. Letting up 500 passing yards to Kirk Cousins.
The defense needs some work.
It was BB also coach probably got left in Atlanta. So
yeah. It's funny because I believe this is the first time this season that two receivers have had 100 yards receiving in the same game.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I believe that's what it said. So 154 for London and 1 touchdown, 105 yards and 2 touchdowns for Darnell Mooney, who interestingly was one of our waiver wire pickups a couple weeks ago.
And you and I told you that, so I picked up Dontavian Wicks earlier this week, and I dropped Darnell Mooney for Dontavian Wicks. I knew Mooney, I never saw this. I saw what he had been doing, which was 6 catches for 63 yards, maybe a touchdown, which is a respectable stat line. But with Watson out this week, and now you just told me Dobbs is out as well.
Potentially.
Dontavian Wicks, who had 13 targets last week.
Right.
Him and Jaden Reed should be in for 20 targets each.
I don't disagree. And I've got Mooney on my team. He was, I think I mentioned it, he was like my last pick of the draft.
Yep.
And he sat on my bench this week, even though Neighbors is out.
Yep.
I decided that I was going to go with DJ Moore. But there's another reason I'm going with DJ Moore is because the person I'm playing against has Caleb Williams. So it's kind of one of those, kind of one of those, with Keenan Allen still, and Roma Dunze, still working his way into a position there, it's more than likely going to be DJ Moore.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's an offset.
I'm in the same position in my other Dynasty League where I have Neighbors, and he's out, so I had to put in DJ Moore in my, in place of him.
It's funny that DJ Moore, who was drafted in, 4th, 5th round ish, at least in a 16-team league, is my 3rd or 4th wide receiving option now behind guys that I picked last in the draft and Neighbors, who I picked 6th or 7th round.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's a weird way to have it.
It's just that's
come around.
Hindsight, of course, but to hear that you got Neighbors in the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah.
Is that in your 2 running back?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, your 16-team 2 running back.
Yeah.
So that makes more sense. But hindsight, it's like, holy crap.
It does. It does and it doesn't.
Yeah.
The funny thing is I've got 4 starting running backs.
Start packaging.
Well, excuse me. I have 3 starting running backs, and then I've got Jonathan Brooks, who will be the starter more than likely. A few weeks after he comes back.
Yep.
Moving on, we've got our picks of the week. At QB, CBS Sportsline says Lamar, Brock Purdy, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Justin Fields, and Deshaun Watson. And I'm not even going to, I look at the stuff that they've done, and we've talked about it, Isaiah Pacheco being, top 1 or 2 top most ranks, of last year, and I can't figure out what they do. So I'm going CJ Stroud versus Buffalo. Stroud has been quiet compared to last year when he exploded onto the scene.
Yeah, and with Stroud too, I guess I wouldn't say bad taste, but maybe a little buyer's remorse creeping in a little bit because of the price you had to pay in your draft to get him.
Yeah.
Well, granted, Dynasty though, you have Stroud.
Oh, yeah.
That is Dynasty different. I'm talking redraft. If you wanted Stroud, you were looking potentially end of 3rd into the 4th.
Yeah.
Is what you were paying for.
And that's where
you haven't quite gotten that.
Right. And in a 16-team redraft, I went Justin Jefferson, running back, DJ Moore, running back, Jaden or Neighbors,
Yep.
and I picked up Goff in like the 8th or 9th, and then came back around that next one and got Cousins.
Yeah.
So I'm getting 39.5 points out of Cousins
Yep.
in a bye week for Goff after Goff put up 32 or something last week, which seemed like a huge number.
Yep.
And it's one of those. Do you spend all of that draft capital on a guy who you're never quite sure how everything's, great. Patrick Mahomes has been one of the top scoring, if not the top scoring outside of maybe Josh Allen, player in fantasy over the last 4 or 5 years. What's he doing this year? His numbers are way down.
Yeah, even last year his numbers were down. But yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard to say, and that's why I kind of look at quarterbacks and I go, I'm going to wait until later.
Yeah.
It just, not in Dynasty, because in Dynasty, obviously, year to year, you want quality.
Yes.
And you know that a CJ Stroud, even if he's going to have a bad year, well, we're in a super flex, so we get to play 2 quarterbacks. So it's not like you're losing a ton if one has an okay day.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
but yeah, against Buffalo, I mean, should be a very good game. Buffalo looking to bounce back after the bit of a dud they threw up last week. Granted that was Derrick Henry just
running all over him. 199 yards, was it?
Yeah, beating the absolute crap out of him. So, yeah.
I think you're going to see, especially Mixon, I believe, is going to probably be out again.
Yep.
If it's a high-scoring game like it could be, it's going to take Stroud throwing.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. So, honestly, he's still coming, back from injury. Started out really rocky last week against Minnesota, but my start's going to be Jordan Love against the Rams, who, still without, their only offensive weapon is Kyren. And Jordan Love, like we said, still coming back. Yes, without Christian Watson, potentially without Romeo Doubs. But you had, like I said, you had a big week from Wicks last, 13 targets. Jaden Reed had a huge game. Tucker Kraft, I think, was the number 1 tight end in fantasy last week. So there's still options there. And you still have guys, Malik Heath, Bo Melton. We've got other guys that can step in and contribute. So
agreed.
I like the matchup there, for Love this week. So.
Yeah. Going on to our running backs, we've got King Henry, we've got Jordan Mason, we've got Kyren, we've got Kenneth Walker III, we've got Brian Robinson, and we've got Kamara, as long as he plays.
Yep.
And I think Kenneth Walker is also a question mark.
He got cleared today.
Okay.
Because I have him in my dynasty, and I got the notification a couple hours ago that
Which dynasty, against me?
No, in the other one where I traded away Patrick Mahomes to get him and Puka in a first, and so far I've won that trade.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with your quarterback's running back. I'm going Josh Jacobs. I think that the Rams have not had a good run defense, and we finally saw some of the breakaways. I think the Packers utilized Jacobs very well last week. We had been getting to that point where it looked like Emmanuel Wilson would get more carries.
Yeah.
But last week it was pretty much Josh Jacobs.
Shades of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon.
Right.
Where one week it was all Aaron Jones, and then next week it was true split 50-50. And, I think a lot of it is just the matchup. I think, and LaFleur has always been a guy who likes to use two. I mean, obviously he's used
absolutely.
2 running backs in a committee. So, depending on the matchup, and this looks like it should be a fairly easy matchup. I'm not writing the Rams off because they did beat San Francisco 2 weeks ago.
They did.
Kyren had a huge game that week. He had a big game last week too. And, our run defense, last week I thought looked a little better.
Yeah, they held Minnesota like 3.2 or something per carry.
I think we're I saw a stat saying that we're like our average is like 80 something yards rushing per game, which is like top quarter of the league right now. So, but should be, Jacob should be able to, either rack up a bunch of yards or maybe punch one or two into the end zone. So
Hoping.
yeah, so
Not because I have him, because I don't have him in any of my leagues.
Yep. So I'm riding a hot hand here, going with Chuba against Chicago. Chicago's defense, while on paper is good, they get left out on the field often because Williams still coming along, figuring it out.
Wait a second, isn't that the guy that told the punter that he's not going to have to punt very much this year?
He's been their MVP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Just confused there for a second.
Yep. And obviously, as soon as Andy Dalton stepped into that starting role, it's been a completely different Carolina team. You got Deontay Johnson putting monster weeks back to back. Xavier Legette flashed last week, so I would expect to see him getting more involved. And I think Chicago. I was talking with my coworker yesterday. Today. Maybe it was yesterday. It was either today or yesterday. He was looking at the games coming up. He's a Bears fan, and he goes, "Oh, Carolina." He goes, "We should be able to win the next couple." And I'm like, "Well, who are you guys playing?" And he goes, "Oh, Carolina." And I said, He's like, "What do you mean? They're horrible." And I'm like,
They were with Bryce Young starting.
Yeah, I said, I don't want to hear it the day after, on Monday when you come in and you're sad because Carolina beat you guys. I said, Andy Dalton's playing well. Chuba has put up 2 monster weeks back to back, kind of. Obviously, like I said, it's a different team with Andy Dalton there because they can actually threaten the defense via, the pass. So Chuba's been playing better because he's had more room to work. So, I think it'll be a little more of the same. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Carolina ends up pulling out a win in Chicago.
I mean, you take a look at some of the teams and their records, and it reminds me of the movie Any Given Sunday.
Pacino.
I mean, at any point in time, a team like Carolina can come up and beat the snot out of someone.
Yeah.
And a team like who's 0-4? Cincy?
Yeah. No,
Jacksonville.
Yeah.
0-4. You would never think that Jacksonville right now, if we were having the draft, Jacksonville would have the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Who would think that when there's Carolina and there's and I'm not picking on the Bears, but the Bears are young and fairly new, and Denver and I mean there are some teams that you don't have faith in, and they're winning some games. So I from the time that I played that Survivor pool, I thought that there were a bunch of trap games, and that Carolina game that week was a trap game, and I ended up losing it on a different one. So
saw that trap, but fell into another.
Right. So moving on, we've got the wide receivers. CBS says that Jaden Reed is number 1.
Nice.
Debo is 2. CeeDee Lamb is 3. Nico Collins is 4. Jamar Chase 5, and DJ Moore 6. I don't necessarily agree with much of that, other than maybe CD and Nico Collins and Jamar Chase.
Yep.
But I don't run the CBS Sports Line apps. So I am going with Justin Jefferson in London versus the New York Jets.
The London game this week.
I think that outside of, like we talked about, outside of Jair Alexander, no one has really shut down Justin Jefferson that well.
So, side note, has Jair been injured the last 2 times we've played Minnesota?
Very possibly.
I feel like he hasn't played against Minnesota.
Yeah, last week he was injured, and then
I feel
possibly
like he missed at least one last year.
Oh, I don't remember. I thought
it was the year prior to that. 2 years ago is the one where he locked him down for
maybe
15 yards, but I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. But yeah, anyway, sorry. To me, it felt like almost brings up the question if he just doesn't want,
Why wouldn't he want to?
I know.
Dude's a stud against him.
I'm just who knows?
But no one else really has slowed down JJ, and you just sit there, and I mean the touchdown catch he had last week against the Packers.
Well, that was a dot from Darnold.
Yeah, that was a great play by Jefferson, getting his hands in a position with the defender practically draped on him. I mean,
you know who he looked like a little bit there?
Who?
Devontae.
Oh, Devontae, yeah.
Where he didn't show his hands until
right. Well, it almost like he couldn't.
Yeah, true.
The ball was all of a sudden in his hands. Yeah. But it was one of those, and I think you were the one that said, that was great coverage or something. And I said, well, no, because he wasn't looking back.
Yeah.
And I see so many of these young defensive backs that they get all excited because they were in the way of a pass, and then you have guys like Jair who actually look at the quarterback and see the ball coming and knock it away.
In that, I think in that particular play, that instant, that DB, I can't remember who it was.
I think it was Keyshawn, wasn't it?
Yeah, okay.
Or was it Ballantyne?
It was one of them. I'm leaning Ballantyne. But, something like that, you're thinking over the top to the corner. I bet you that's what was going through his mind was, okay, Darnold, he's on the sideline, he's going over the top, to try and drop one in. But, so I could see a little bit of that where it was just like a holy shit, he put that right behind me,
Right.
So, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, against the Jets, I mean, the Jets have been struggling. The defense hasn't been exactly what it
Right. They haven't been terrible.
Yes.
But it's still Justin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sam Darnold's playing out of his mind.
Right. Until someone proves me wrong with that, I like JJ.
Yeah. I mean, and I credit being a Packers fan, this hurts, but I'm giving a ton of credit to Minnesota, to the Vikings for being what they are. I mean, everybody thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league. You're running, I mean, granted, because JJ McCarthy got hurt, everybody thought he was.
No one knew what Sam Darnold
very
was
well is the future, but and then it's Sam Darnold, and his track record was okay. Couple, same in Carolina, started out the first 3 weeks. He was the number one fantasy quarterback, and playing really well. So could he still, turn into a pumpkin?
Oh, he's a redhead, so
yeah, there you go. Could he revert back to his previous form as a pumpkin and start playing bad? True, yeah, he could, but I just think they have so much confidence right now, and they're running that team so well. Like I said, it hurts, but they've done a great job.
Yeah,
a great job over there. So, yeah, I'm going again. Hot hand.
You're going with the Irishman.
Yeah. Old Terry McLaurin from Dublin.
From Dublin.
Scary Terry. Jane Daniels. I think he's the number one fantasy quarterback so far this season, or at least top 3 is my guess.
Cousins is one now.
Well, yes, if you count last night. But yeah, so I mean Daniels has been, he's been surgical at times. I mean, you watch him and he's really doing it. There's like I said, there's the little chats on the player pages on Yahoo, and guys are like, oh, why isn't he running it more? And he's only throwing like 4-yard passes, and another guy's like, watch him, like he doesn't.
And all of a sudden he drops that 52-yarder on top of McLaurin.
Yeah, I mean he's drawing those safeties in.
Well, it's good that he's been surgical, because I'm looking for a lobotomy. yeah, thanks.
So yeah, McLaurin, I like him against Cleveland. Cleveland's been struggling.
Yeah. Everyone thought that Cleveland was going to have probably the top 1 or 2 defenses.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the names on that defense. Obviously, Myles Garrett, at the top of the list. But I mean, everybody's thinking it was going to be a typical Cleveland year where the defense kind of like Cleveland and Pittsburgh to me feel like very similar teams a lot of the times, because their offenses can only score 16 points. But their defense
18, but usually it's 6 field goals.
Exactly. But their defense will hold the opponent to 9, 10, 12 points, know. So they don't need to put up a whole lot of, points on the offense. But that hasn't been the case this year. So I think it'll end up being a good game, because Washington's defense isn't, that great either. So I think we'll see Jaden and Terry are starting to really click and mesh. So I think we'll get some more of that, and should be another big game for Scary Terry.
Yep. Next, we've got the tight ends. We've got Kittle, Kelsey, Freiermuth, McBride, Kincaid, and Likely.
Like I said, holding on to Likely in that bottom spot there.
Yeah, it's almost like, who do you play?
Mm-hmm. I don't think you can play either of them right now.
I don't know if you can play anybody. I mean,
out of that list?
No, I mean, tight end. You might as well just put the names up there, throw a dart, see who comes up, and hope that they do well. You can throw a name out there, and then they don't do anything. Mm-hmm. You can, everyone has said, oh, this is your guy for this week. Mm-hmm. I sat Pitts last night against you in our dynasty because I am losing confidence in him. Yeah, well, and he goes and has 8 targets for 75 yards.
Yeah,
or 8 catches.
Yeah, put up a goose last week.
Right,
so,
right.
Don't worry, I did Pitts. Sean, the guy who put up 88 last night, had Pitts as tight end. So
I know. I could have played Pitts. I could have played Mooney. Instead, I'm going to go with Green Bay
Kraft,
Tucker Kraft. And I'm hoping he scores like last week also.
Yeah.
So, but this week my choice is Turd Ferguson. Had to throw that in there. Sorry.
It's a funny hat.
So I'm going to go with Ferguson at Pittsburgh. Again, this is every time I see Ferguson play, every time I watch one of those games, he is getting his nose into something. He strikes me as the kind of guy that is always looking for a fight. Well, always looking to scrap with someone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't obviously, went to Madison, and for those who aren't familiar, he's Barry Alvarez's grandson.
Right.
So, I mean, you're basically the king of Wisconsin, or at least Madison, is your grandfather.
Yeah.
I mean, you get afforded certain privileges. He's been around football day one.
You do, but at the same time, I'm guessing there's that expectation, at least from himself, that I have to prove myself outside of that name.
Yeah.
And so he has always been that guy that he backs up his players. He blocks. He tries to argue for an extra foot so that they give him the first down, even though it wasn't his catch or whatever. And
he's a team guy.
Yeah, he is.
With a chip on his shoulder.
He is.
I like Jake Ferguson. I have him in the one dynasty league where I have Andrews, and I've been, obviously Ferguson missed a week, like week 2, I think it was. But since he's been back, he's been one of the more consistent tight ends.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a big part of, outside of CeeDee Lamb, he's probably the second most important piece, offensive weapon or piece on the Cowboys.
Right.
So he's going to get his targets.
Yep.
And I mean, Pittsburgh's defense is crazy good, but again, he's gonna get his targets. Right. And with the tight end landscape, I mean, we saw Kelsey finally wake up a little bit because of Patrick Mahomes putting his own hit on Rashee Rice's knee, which that one's rough. So now people are talking about Devontae to Kansas City and how crazy that would be. I don't think they can afford him. I think Kansas City would be better off going after like Amari Cooper. They could afford Amari, but yeah. So.
I think Devontae's going to the Jets.
I think he's going to the Jets. I think the Steelers are going to go after him pretty hard because they had a deal on the table with the Niners, and they were going to pay Brandon Ayuk the $30 million that he wanted, but Ayuk didn't want to go, and the Niners didn't because I think they were trying to get Pickens back.
Right.
So, I think Pittsburgh will push him hard. My dark horse team to land Devontae is actually Washington. I think him and McLaurin would be good.
Be interesting.
It would be. But
I think Dallas wants him too.
Yeah, they could. I mean, there's teams out there.
Even though Jerry Jones probably says they don't.
Yeah, well, there's getting a little off track. Well, back to the Cowboys with Ferguson. There's a clip of Jerry Jones. They had to stop practice for like 3 minutes because he landed his helicopter on the side of their practice field. And somebody goes, yeah, Cowboys couldn't afford, in quotations, audio listeners, couldn't afford.
You audio listeners.
Yeah, you audio listeners.
You video listeners, you're okay.
Couldn't afford Derrick Henry, but Jerry Jones can land his effing helicopter on the field. So,
yep.
Yeah. But yeah, again, that could end up being a pretty good game. I mean, Justin Fields has been playing really well. That Pittsburgh offense has been actually clicking decent. So, and Dallas's defense has not been that great.
No.
So, that could end up being a very good game. I am going with Brock Bowers against Denver. Again, Denver's defense is actually pretty good this year. Hopefully it works out for Bowers. But I'm also hoping that Denver has a really good game defensively because I'm streaming them this week. So, because no Devontae.
No Devontae.
Yep. So, and then the mess that is that running back room right now with Madison and Zamir White, Zamir White's been horrible.
Yep.
We know who Alexander Madison is. He's not great. But, so I think a lot of it's going to fall onto Bowers. And then obviously, they're calling, a lot of people calling the shot on Trey Tucker this week because of Surtain probably being on Jacoby Myers. And we know Surtain is, probably one of the, him and L'Jarius Sneed, I think, are probably the top 2 lockdown corners, in the game right now. So, so I think Bowers will be in line for a pretty good, healthy amount of targets, we'll say.
Yeah. I agree. Next, we move on to our love 'em, flip 'em.
I didn't even read that.
Leave 'em. And it's tight ends this week. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, I threw Bowers in there.
Yep.
I threw LaPorta in there. And I threw Dallas Goedert in there. And
that's tough.
It really is. Because if you were looking just at last year, it's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. LaPorta stays.
Yep. Bowers wasn't in the league. But
you could probably get some trade capital for him.
Yep.
And Goddard probably would be the leave him.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily right now.
Yeah, I mean, Goddard's the top 1 or 2 tight end so
to
far.
This point,
to this point. So, he's, I mean, granted, we'll see what his involvement is when A.J. Brown comes back. I think Devonta Smith is out again this week or potentially. So if both of those guys are out, our Eagles, they're not on bye, are they?
Yeah.
They are. Okay.
They are
so
on
never
bye.
mind.
So this week it won't matter.
Yeah. But, so when Brown and Smith come back healthy, we'll see what his involvement is. It could revert back to where he's, 3 catches for 30 yards, which really isn't that bad in this year's tight end landscape. So.
No. When you've got Pitts going for 0 last week.
Back-to-back zeros from Andrews.
I mean, it's just, it's like I said, it's been a weird year.
Yeah.
And Detroit hasn't really shown outside of last week that they're anything like the scoring machine that they were last year.
Yeah. They haven't been as efficient, I guess.
Right.
And LaPorta he scored a lot of touchdowns last year. He didn't put up a whole lot of yardage. It was the touchdowns. He had some longer touchdowns, which those are now going to Jameson Williams. You're seeing
and the short ones are running with Singletary.
Yeah. Singletary.
Montgomery.
Well, they even
always mess those two up.
Yeah. They also, last week, they also got Gibbs. He had the 2. He had a rush from the 1 yard line and then from the 3. So that was nice to see, me being a Gibbs manager, because that's so frustrating the way they do that, where it's one drive, it's Montgomery. The next, it works. But
it does. But last year, those were all passing touchdowns.
Yes.
Amon-Ra, LaPorta, etc.
Gibbs towards the end, passing touchdowns too. But so I mean this
which is why I went with Goff.
Yeah, this season, I mean, right now, I'm loving Bowers. I think he's just again with Devontae potentially probably not being there, within the next week or 2.
That scares me
potentially.
Well.
It does, but I think it's just going to be a necessity. He's going to be, PPR. That was
PPR. That's great.
Yes, and that was the argument for Neighbors. It's the Giants, no Saquon, Daniel Jones, but Neighbors is the guy. So he's going to get 18 targets.
Well,
a day.
and the funny thing is, so's Wan'Dale Robinson.
Yeah, I saw Neighbors is the number one target. He's got the most targets through week 4. Going into week 5.
Yep.
He's the number one, and I think
For all receivers.
For all receivers.
Yep.
All players. And Wan'Dale's number 4.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
But
yes,
that
Neighbors.
Yes. Yeah.
And if yes, I agree. In PPR, Bowers is going to be huge.
Yeah.
Because he will get the 10, 12 targets.
Mm-hmm.
My fear is that they may. I think Goddard disappears somewhat. So I'm gonna leave Goddard, even though he is one of the top scoring tight ends right now.
I think. That one's tough.
Well,
like I said, if you're looking at it this week and you're not, say you're not looking past this week, I don't know if you can leave either LaPorta or Goddard. I think you'd have to try and flip both of them. But if you're looking past it, yes, I would leave Goddard and flip LaPorta because of the name and the offense he's tied to. LaPorta's going to have big games, but it's not going to be what it was last season.
And last year, everyone was anointing him, and I think we did too, as one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends in fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
And how quickly things change when schemes change. Like I said about picking a stud quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know the scheme that is going to be run. What offense is going to be run in Detroit? Is it expected that the 2 running backs are going to get more touches than the running backs did last year?
Yeah.
Probably not, but it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to take away from someone. Amon-Ra has suffered. Yep. Jameson has suffered. LaPorta has suffered. Yeah. And I think that, from that perspective, it just depends on how they continue, or, if they continue with the strategy that they've used thus far, which hasn't been great necessarily for Detroit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They're basically, it's Dan Campbell being like, you look at the start of the game last week for the Lions, it was like 6 straight David Montgomery rushes. Right. And then Gibbs comes in, breaks a 20-yard, has 1 rush for 20 yards. The very next play is like 3 consecutive handoffs to David Montgomery, and then he scores. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I think a lot of it this year is just Dan Campbell being like, come stop the run. And if you do, guess what? Here's Jamison Williams, who's, a freak athlete, super fast, 70-yard touchdown.
Right.
Or you're going to come up and, and you're going to move your linebackers up, or you're going to start bringing pressure. Guess what? Here's Amon-Ra for 12 yards, or a quick slant behind your outside linebacker, and he's gone.
Agreed.
So it's just, I think the defensive schemes they've been facing so far have allowed them to really just sit back and just, again, hand the ball off repeatedly to either back.
Right.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with you. I would keep Bowers, flip LaPorta, and unfortunately leave Goddard.
Yeah. Like I said, if, again, you hear news if out of the bye, Brown is practicing or Devont is practicing, I would, if somehow you have another option, at tight end, I would try and flip Goddard just based off of what he's done so far.
Right. Agreed. Well, that's all we've got for this week. Hope you get a chance to listen or watch on your favorite YouTube channel. Otherwise, I'm Ozzy.
And I'm Austin.
Have a great week.
See you later.